The Red Sea Reefer S series is Red Sea's top of the line saltwater aquarium with upgrades like longer and wider dimensions, a Euro brace along the top and an aluminium structure for the cabinet. I've had the 6-foot version, the S-850, for just under 9 months now and I generally really like it, but it's not perfect, so now the honeymoon period has worn off, I'm going to tell you the 6 things I don't like about the Red Sea Reefer S series tanks. Before we get into that though, there is of course the usual disclosure. While no money changed hands, Red Sea gave me this tank for free. They didn't ask me to make this video, they don't get any input into any of the videos I make, and of course I am free to say whatever I want, both good and bad. But at the end of the day, it's an expensive tank and I got it for free, so do with that information what you will. The first thing I don't like then is the back panels of the cabinet. The front and side panels are a nice solid plywood, but the back panels are a thin textured plastic, and that means it's much more difficult to mount things to the back wall. The plastic is only 2 or 3 millimeters thick, so drilling screws in doesn't work as well as it does with wood, and because the plastic is textured, adhesive strips don't stick to it very well either. For example, I installed these cable management ducts when I set the tank up, but some of them started coming off more or less straight away. That's partly because of the textured surface, but also partly because the panels flex when you push them, so you can't properly press sticky pads hard against the surface when you install them, like you could do with wood, which means they don't form that strong initial bond. Because of the aluminium frame, the rear panels aren't needed for structural support, but the plastic back just feels like a cost-saving measure to me, which is a bit stingy on the top of the range tanks. Related to that is that ventilation on the cabinet is more or less non-existent. There's a small gap at the top and bottom of the dry section for the cables to go through, but the only gap above the sump section is a small cutaway in the top corner where the plumbing goes. It was the same story on my previous Red Sea tank, the Peninsula 500, and I used to get condensation on the inside of the cabinet in the winter, and the cabinet would retain too much heat in the summer, which meant the water temperature of my main tank would increase unnecessarily. Now, because I knew this would be an issue with this tank, I installed 2 PC fans when I set it up, and that has negated all of the issues I otherwise would have had. But as it turns out, I now get a tiny bit of salt creep dripping down into a place that I can't access for cleaning, and all of this could have been avoided with a bigger cutaway, like you get with some other tanks. Number 3 is the Euro brace. Now, I don't mean the brace itself, I actually really like that because it gives me somewhere to rest stuff and I appreciate the extra structural support for the tank. But the part I don't like is that it's only on 3 sides, not all 4. Now, I assume Red Sea left the brace off the rear because doing so makes mounting light brackets easier and most people will mount their lights to the back of the tank. But I always prefer to hang my lights from the ceiling and I would have much preferred an extra brace bar along the back of the tank. If the brace covered all 4 sides and if it was a little wider, I would have been tempted to go without a mesh cover because that would make top-down viewing easier and most fish jump around the edges of the tank, so a wider brace would potentially stop fish from jumping out of the tank. To be fair though, it's always best to have a mesh cover anyway, I just would have liked the option of going without. Next up is the location of the auto top-off sensor. Because the main sump is split into 4 corners, the return pump section where the auto top-off has to go is hidden out of sight behind the filter sock section, which I've replaced with Red Sea's automatic filter roller, the Reef Mat. And Red Sea chose to put the auto top-off sensor in the front left corner instead of the rear left corner, so if you want to look in and see where the water level is, you need to get your head right into the back of the cabinet and crane your neck round to the left, all while trying to avoid getting skimmer juice on the back of your bonds. Because the sump is split into quarters, the ATO sensor is always going to be slightly obscured, but it's something you do need to check occasionally, and it would have been much easier to check if they'd put it on the rear corner instead of the front. The penultimate thing I don't like about the Red Sea Reefer S-850 is the split sump. And again, it's not the split sump itself that I don't like, it's just the effect that that has on cabinet space. The plywood panel that separates the 2 sump sections is a structural part of the frame, so I'm guessing Red Sea included it to add support right in the centre of the tank. But the effect of having a panel across the middle of the cabinet is that you lose about 4 inches of space, and that's space that could have gone toward making a bigger sump or having a bigger dry section, 2 things you can basically never have too much of in a reef tank. Now, the split sump is only a feature on the S-850 and S-1000 tanks, so the 4 and 5 foot S-series tanks make more efficient use of the available space, but an extra 4 inches of dry cabinet space on this tank would have been really useful for various dosing bottles, equipment, or even just plugs and power supplies. And the final thing I don't like is the slide out panel. Now, in theory, the slide out panel is a great idea because it gives you a place to store things that you can easily access simply by sliding the panel forward. So it's making use of space that otherwise would be more or less dead. But in practice, I just haven't found a good use for it. The Red Sea videos show it holding dosing pumps and bottles, but that means you'll have extra excess tubing dangling down, which I don't want as it could get caught at some point, and I think there are better places to put dosing pumps that make use of space elsewhere in the cabinet that would otherwise be dead. I fitted this IKEA SCARDIS rack that has a few changeable storage options, but I never find myself sliding the panel out to access it, so in practice all the slide out panel does is use up another 2 inches of space unnecessarily. Now I can see it working for someone who has the dry section absolutely packed full to the point that the only way to access stuff on the drawer is to slide it out, but for me it's turned out to be a really nice idea that just doesn't have any real practical benefit, and the only reason I haven't removed it is because I really want it to work. So if you found a better use for it, let me know in the comment section below. Now of course it's not all bad, and the tank is actually really nice and has some really good features that I particularly like. So in the next video I'll run through the top 5 things I do like about the tank, so make sure you like and subscribe for that. And if you've got any questions, let me know in the comment section below, and until next time, happy reefing.